Hello and thanks for joining us. Today we're paying tribute to Jean-Paul Belmondo, a leading figure in French film who's died aged 88. The cool rebel of the new wave of French cinema, shot to international fame in Jean-Luc Godard's revolutionary classic Breathless. Let's cross now to our film critic Lisa Nesselson, who's at the Deauville American Film Festival in Normandy. Now, Lisa, Jean-Paul Belmondo's death is so heartbreaking to the French people that there's to be a national tribute led by President Macron.
That's extraordinary and also completely fitting. And I'll say, I'll always remember where I was when I heard the news, right here where people were stunned because he seemed kind of immortal and eternal because he was always there. A Jean-Paul Belmondo movie in the cinema was almost a guarantee of a good time. And he had such a range, but he always brought insouciance and joie de vivre to his comic roles. He was conservatory trained. He played roles such as Keane and Cyrano on stage. And he was just a part of people's lives. People grew up going to the movies with their family members, and then younger kids now didn't realize he was quote unquote so old because they'd been watching his movies on TV with their families for years. Action, adventure, really as close of a guarantee as you could get to a good time if you went to the movies. He also did serious work. Alain Delon died in his arms in Borsellino, and I have to say that I had the thrill in 2018 of sharing the stage with Mr. Belmondo. I gave him a career honorary award, and even though he had suffered a stroke and had a hard time standing up for long or speaking for long, I have to say this man radiated charisma and that wonderful, wonderful smile.
Well, Jean-Paul Belmondo was admired around the world. The Canadian filmmaker Denis Villeneuve, who was in France for the premiere of his new movie June, paid tribute to the French legend.
It was real sadness. I just learnt about it. He was an actor I adored. He's a great monument of French cinema, but internationally he was also someone everyone loved. Mr. Belmondo. I associated him with the French New Wave. I have Pierrot le Fou in mind. Yes, it's sad, but at the same time, what an exceptional career.
And there'll be a special programme dedicated to Jean-Paul Belmondo on France 24 this Thursday, the 9th of September, as a national tribute will be held in the centre of Paris, led by President Macron. And moving on now to a living legend who could also be described as a cool rebel. Johnny Depp was one of the guests of honour at the Deauville American Film Festival this year. He was there to promote his new film, City of Lies, which you enjoyed, Lisa.
I did. Johnny Depp, you don't want to set your watch by him because he kept crowds waiting not once but twice, almost an hour. But then as soon as he got here, he had them eating out of his hands, and that would apply even if those hands belonged to Edward Scissorhands. In City of Lies, which I did enjoy, he plays a real-life Los Angeles detective who is trying to get to the bottom of the shooting death of 24-year-old rapper Christopher Wallace, better known as the notorious B.I.G. Detective Poole, who he plays, came to believe that Death Row Records had the LAPD or certain members in their pocket and could sort of dictate what went on, including assassination. It's a complex tale about a still unsolved homicide. And if the notorious B.I.G. had lived, his estimated lifetime earnings stand at $1 billion. So this is an important unsolved homicide. Every time Detective Poole got close to maybe figuring out, putting the dots together, something thwarted him from on high. Christopher Wallace's mother is still alive. She plays herself in the film. And Johnny Depp took every opportunity to say that we owe it to her to find out what happened to her son. And strangely enough, this thwarting, this stopping has gone on to apply to the film itself, which has been completed for 2, maybe close to 3 years. And yet they've had a very hard time getting it out into theaters for various reasons. So we're lucky to see it here in France.
Well, I spoke to Johnny Depp and the director, Brad Furman, in Deauville, and I can confirm we had to wait a little while for them to arrive as well. I asked them why the film has taken so long to come out.
Hollywood. That's really the answer. The politics of Hollywood are a very complicated thing, though based in elementary school retaliatory tactics. I don't think there was any accident that the film was sort of, well, what?
I would say suppressed, for sure.
Suppressed, taken out of our possession. As long as it's an ongoing investigation, some evidence stays locked away in the dark.
Who shot Biggie Smalls?
It's a riddle.
And you can watch the full interview with Johnny Depp and Brad Furman on our website at france24.com. So, Lisa, there are 13 films in competition in Deauville. The jury is led by the Franco-British actress Charlotte Gainsbourg. Are you impressed by what you've seen so far?
Well, I haven't seen everything that's being offered yet, but as every year, there's a real leaning toward very independent American filmmaking, and that can range from polished gems to nice tries to outright duds. But there are definitely two films that I've enjoyed very, very much. One of them is called The Night House, and it's one of those spins on a woman alone in an isolated house with a lot of nighttime activity. And Rebecca Hall does a very, very good job because this is genuinely scary. I actually was startled and jumped at least once out of my seat, which is always a good sign with this kind of film. And she plays a character whose husband of 14 years has died very, very recently. She's alone in the house, and suffice it to say, there are many things that go bump in the night. Let's take a look.
You were right. You were right. There's nothing. There is nothing. You're safe now. Safe from what?
Now, this year, there's only one film showing that you have to be 18 years of age to see, and that is called Pleasure. It's the involving and edifying tale of a young woman who leaves her native Sweden to come to Los Angeles with the goal of becoming an extremely well-known and successful porn star. On the one hand, it's the story of an independent woman with goals and a work ethic who is willing to do just about anything to get to where she thinks she wants to go. But it's also about the nitty-gritty of making hardcore porn.
Okay, well, I had an interesting chat with the writer and director of Pleasure, Ninja Thyberg, and the main actress, Sophia Kappel, who's the only person in the film who doesn't come from the adult entertainment industry. And you can watch that in the coming weeks when the movie comes out here in France. Now, Lisa, Pleasure starts it off a bit like a documentary, and in Deauville there's a small sidebar of documentaries.
There's a small, it may be small, but it is extremely well programmed. There were two that I've liked very much so far. One is Oliver Stone's JFK Revisited, which premiered in Cannes and bears repeated viewings. And Oliver Stone, you may remember 30 years ago, made the movie with Kevin Costner called JFK. And the can of worms that is trying to solve who shot the man is opening up. Every decade, more documents are released, and it's citizen researchers, not government committees, that are finding discrepancies, getting to the bottoms of things. And it's an extremely rigorous, amazingly interesting film that will leave you believing that it's very, very unlikely that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, shot President Kennedy. Another look at American life is by a very interesting French historian and film critic, Jean-Baptiste Doré. He was the film critic for Charlie Hebdo for many years. And in 2010, he went to the United States to research an article about Michael Cimino, who you may remember from The Deer Hunter and Heaven's Gate, among other films. And he spent a week with him driving to the places where he shot those iconic movies, to Ohio and Montana. And last year, he went back and spoke to people who remember the shooting, and he's done a portrait of what America is like based on the wit and wisdom of Michael Cimino, who he recorded 11 years ago when he did that interview.
And just before we go, one film you've picked out for us that's showing in Deauville is Paul Schrader's The Card Counter. Tell us more.
Well, it stars Oscar Isaac as a taciturn, businesslike, meticulous man who goes from town to town playing blackjack and poker, staying under the radar. And like all of Schrader's films, he burst on the scene with his screenplay for Taxi Driver, which Martin Scorsese directed. And in his screenplays, it's almost always a protagonist who is troubled and looking for some sort of transcendence and redemption. Now, you wouldn't think you could get that at the poker table, but this is an absolutely riveting story. And I don't know anything about playing cards. You don't need to. It's about a man in search of redemption, and far, far deeper a story than it appears at first sight.
Thank you so much, Lisa Nesselson in Deauville for us. Enjoy the rest of the festival. And we're going to leave you with the card counter. Thanks for joining us. Remember our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
Having been sentenced to 10 years in prison, I learned to count cards.
How'd you do that?
Poker's all about waiting.
Check, raise, re-raise, call.
Then something happens.
You remember him?
This is where all the good stuff happens.
They made you the fall guy.
You need to back off.
You've been around him. He's a mystery.